So, boys, I have in here CrimsonCasts, awesome speedrunner, big part of the Path of Exile 2 community. I love him, but today he came to fight because he says that rarity in Path of Exile 2 is a good thing. And I say that rarity in Path of Exile 2 sucks dick. So, today we are going to decide what the fuck is going on, and let's do it. Do you want me to tell you why it sucks, or do you want to tell me why it is good?
Okay, I want you to tell me why it sucks. Like, what... Like, if you have rarity in the endgame on, like, your rings or whatever, what do you want to put there instead?
Okay, this is a good question. Thank you so much. What do I want to put in my rings, in my boots, in my gloves, in my helmet, in my amulet instead of rarity? Anything that is cool and not boring, and preferably that involves combat that gives me some kind of defense or offense, and not some pussy shit that says like, ooh, I find more items. What kind of boring pussy dog shit is that, man? Also, since you are taking... Second, let me finish up this argument. Since you are putting up, because this is an affix in your gear, right? It is taking up the slot of an affix, of a modifier. It is in theory taking the place of something that could be helping your character with power, which means that builds that require all their affixes to be able to function properly because they are weaker are displaced from the highest metagame because they cannot give up an affix to put rarity in that dog shit. So it separates the metagame between builds that can get rarity and builds that cannot get rarity.
Sure. So I have many questions about this, but I'll say like my intro bit first. I, in general, like rarity for a couple of reasons. One is rarity, for me as someone who enjoys builds that are conceptually simple. Like, what I mean by that is like, if I was going to play a Slams Titan, for example, it would be pretty easy for me to get more than enough armor and life to survive, more than enough resistance, and more than enough damage to one-shot packs and like two-shot juiced map bosses pretty early on in the season, right? And then it just becomes like, how long does the season last for me? How long does the league last? And part of what rarity does for me personally is if my character is fully geared level 93 on day 5 of the league, and I still want to enjoy stuff, I want the gear chase to last as long as the other parts of the season do. So like, I want there to still feel like there's a purpose to searching for, crafting, and trading gear, as long as I'm still interested in the new bosses, the new league mechanic, the chase items, leveling up, all that. And without rarity, the avenue that would go down would be more limited, and it would be limited to things that I also like, finding lineage supports, chase uniques, things like that. But part of what interests me about rarity is that it gives me an option to sort of like compress the affixes on my gear. What I mean by that is if I get, say, a ring that has 30-30-30 lightning, fire, and cold res, versus I get a ring that has 16 all res, if I can figure out a way to replace that shortfall, I now have one affix instead of two, and that allows me to fit rarity in. And so it gives me like more gear upgrade paths and lengthens the long run of the league in that way. And because we have so many other sources of rarity, tablets, waystones, boss modifiers, for example, many map bosses have internal rarity multipliers. I don't think that you need to get beyond a very, very achievable amount of rarity, 50% rarity on your character in order to be able to farm 2 to 4 div per map in Path of Exile 2, and therefore, after that, it's diminishing returns.
Okay, can I say something?
But I have a couple of questions for you about rarity. The other thing that I want to point out is like a bias.
But I want to address that because then I won't have a chance. Sure. The thing is, I understand what you are trying to say. Okay, you want to keep expanding your character and keep chasing stuff after you are basically done with the character and you want another venue of continuing progressing the character. Hey, that is a good thing. I am not against that. But why does it have to be rarity though? Cannot it be something else? Why it has to be this dog shit stat that warps the economy, the way that people build their characters, the meta game, that it is a boring style. Why cannot we do something else? In PoE 1, you have way more chasing than in PoE 2. You keep building and building and building your character, and you don't go after fucking rarity. So
sure,
we already have a way of keep building the character that doesn't involve rarity. Why not not go down that route? By the way, for people, when we are discussing rarity, we are meaning rarity on gear, because that is different than rarity on the map or on the waystone, on the atlas. I am fine with that. I am meaning the affix on your gear, on your character.
Sure. So part of my thought is that when I look at other ARPGs that I'm familiar with, and I'm admittedly not a PoE 1 player, but Magic Find is the name for the equivalent stat in Diablo 2, and you can reach insane amounts of Magic Find. You can reach 600% Magic Find if you min-max, and nobody does that in Diablo 2, and that's because there are other things in the balance of Diablo 2 character design that incentivize you to sort of off-ramp pursuing additional Magic Find in your progression for Diablo 2.
Very important, and that is why in PoE 2 it is a problem. Rarity exists as an affix on gear in PoE 1, and it is not that much of a problem, because the difference is that in PoE 2 the rarity applies to currency. In Diablo 2 it doesn't apply to runes, which is what people effectively use as currency, and in PoE 1 it doesn't affect currency at all. It only applies to gear. So basically getting a normal to magic and a magic to rare to unique and the tierings of uniques. But what if it doesn't upgrade an exalt to a divine, for example?
Sure. So then my question is like, okay, so you're saying rarity is overtuned and it shouldn't apply to currency. I can see that as an argument that we should make rarity less valuable and we should make it not apply to currency. Or you can imagine it shouldn't apply to currencies above a chaos, so it doesn't apply to chaos, chance, etc., but it does improve your probability of getting like regals, elks, and exalts during campaign, for example. Like, I can imagine all kinds of conversations in that space, but it seems to me that a lot of people are like, delete rarity, and I'm like, I want more content in the game, and I can imagine that there are tuning changes for rarity that need to happen, but a lot of the argument seems to me that people are like min-maxing on the idea that we need to like delete rarity because other things are good. What other like glove suffix do you want?
Or make it not apply to currency. Those are my ideas.
Sure. So then here's my follow-up question about it like not applying to currency, and this is like mostly an SSF question, but it could apply to trade as well. I play a ton of like progression. Like most of my time in PoE 2 is under character level 85. The balance of transmutes, augments, regals, exalts that I get is a big issue in progression. If you have 500 augments but no transmutes, it's hard to get an item upgrade because you can't pick up weight bases and do anything with them. So for me as a speedrunner, I often use rarity. Like I will equip and unequip items that have rarity on them if it's not too big of a detriment to the core part of my build, my resistances, my damage, my defenses. Then I'll be doing that in order to like increase the probability that I find a regal in the next zone or an exalt that I need to finish my weapon craft. And I'm curious, like for you, even in the trade league environment, very early on in the league, would you like some avenue to be able to adjust your currency, like the ratio of the basic currencies that you get, by which I mean things like chaos and lower?
Yes, I wouldn't give a fuck about that, because the problem that I have with rarity is basically in the endgame when you are focusing on the economy of the player base, rarity for the metagame is perceived, and not perceived, well, it is perceived as a mandatory stat. right? Your character or your build is dog shit if you cannot fit rarity on it. Because if you don't use rarity, which I don't, you are handicapping yourself in terms of currency making per hour, right? Divines per hour. You are saying, okay, I am going to earn X amount less of money per hour by not running rarity.
Sure.
So if we go with your way of doing it, nobody in the end game that is trying to make a lot of money will give a flying fuck because nobody wants to transform a transmute into an augmentation. So yes, I am fine with that. What I don't want is a stat that is mandatory, right? Because right now it is not truly mandatory, but
there are all kinds of stats that are mandatory.
Player psychology, it is. You know what I'm trying to say.
There are all kinds of stats that are mandatory. Why is it like
exactly? And I don't want to give another one. I already have movement speed in boots. I already have my resistances, chaos resistances.
Sure, but then why are we like what's the core difference then between resistances being mandatory versus like spell levels on your amulet being mandatory versus movement speed on your boots being mandatory versus rarity? Is it just that it's a non-combat stat?
That is the number one thing. Obviously, yes. Non-combat stat, it is boring. It is lame as fuck. And second of all, when you compound all the mandatory stuff, then you have less room to make creative builds. Because if I have to put movement speed, I have to put resistances, I have to put level of skills, and now on top of that, I have also to put rarity. Now you are constricting the build space to a very few amount of builds that can fit all this shit, right? Now, if you remove rarity, you open a little bit more. If people complain, a lot of people, I am not one of those people, but a lot of people already complain about the spells, skills, level of skills, because they feel too mandatory. So, and you already have resistances, and you already have attributes. So you want to put another dog shit on me, and on top of that, it is non-combat related.
I'm not sure that I agree with the idea that removing constraints increases creativity. Like,
further explaining this, but I agree, but explain in this context.
Sure. So I'll give two examples, and they're both pretty limited, but it'll point at what I'm thinking of. The first is that, like, our friend Lolcohol recently did a challenge run where he was constrained to play SSF, and he couldn't progress until he had one-shot the boss. And what that resulted in was a bunch of bizarre and creative strategies where he was backtracking or he was fighting in particular zones because of item level breakpoints, and he made bizarre decisions on his tree because he had a rule where he could retry the boss, and that meant that critical damage bonus was valuable to him because you can get a ton of it. But critical hit chance didn't really matter because he can try as many times as he wants. And so he had this very unorthodox build, which had a huge amount of critical damage bonus, and he was behaving really oddly in the way that he allocated his currency and in the way that he pursued item upgrades. And it was super creative and completely dissimilar to the way that you would play Path of Exile in any other format. But that was because of the constraint of needing to one-shot every boss. And so that drew out more creativity. Similarly, like, I'm going to get pilloried in the comments for this, but when I think of the most finely tuned builds that I see, they aren't endgame builds because it's trivial to make a crazy powerful POB at level 95, because once you have access to even a couple of divines to rub together to buy good jewels, you can make an insanely powerful endgame character without much advanced stuff. Now, there are super creative endgame builds with creative uses of combo and of charge regulation and of shattering ice crystals and of other advanced mechanics and making and spending rage and summoning totems, and all kinds of crazy things can happen. But the racing builds that I see, which require, for example, the main mercenary race build uses skills from 5 different classes and, like, deliberately cuts suboptimal support gems because you can make some progress with them now and then unequip them and put them on something later, or tries to find crazy synergies, or tries to use like minimum possible ways to create rage, or to find Kalgurin supports, or to do all of these other things. all of those instances of creativity are enforced by the constraint of trying to go as fast as possible. And this is true of all kinds of challenge runs and all kinds of other things. So when I look at the main game, I think that, for example, if you had a huge amount of power creep, the diversity of builds would go down and the level of mastery of mechanics of the very best, most creative guide authors would no longer be necessary, because the game would be so trivial. And so the constraint of the difficulty and the constraint of having multiple affixes that you want and needing to consider every trade-off forces you to make more personalized and more creative decisions.
Okay. you are signaling something that is cool in gaming, and how challenges can make you think in creative ways, and I agree with you. But you are still like not going one step further, which is what happens in the actual game. For example, you are trying to compare the restrict build, or the build that is playing with the restriction, to the normal game, but you cannot do that. Now imagine we make a league, we enforce a league where everybody has to play like Lolcohol was playing. People will fastly discover what is the build that actually performs best in that type of environment, and everybody will gravitate towards that. And now the creativity compared, or all the possible builds you could make work in the game without the constraint, versus all the possible builds you could make work with the constraints. Obviously you will get more variety without the constraints, because with the constraints, not every build can one-shot the fucking boss. As you are saying, he had to go specifically for the crits or whatever. So if your build doesn't have the capacity to do that, then it is out of the question immediately, which from the whole pool of possible builds, you are removing a huge chunk. And similarly, the same happens with the speedrunning. Speedrunners know strategies and builds that are good for speedrunning, and that constrains them. And yes, they have to be creative within those constraints. But you are, again, leaving out a bunch of builds because they simply don't work within those constraints. And the idea in the main game where you don't have those constraints is to have freedom. I understand the thing about power creep, but you cancel power creep by introducing difficult content or nerfing the player.
Well, so I have a rebuttal here, and I'd like to ask chat this question. So in my mind, part of like the analogy that I'm making is that like different players have different goals, and therefore like giving players some constraints in that you want some amount of rarity, and you have to cap your res, and you have to get good damage, and you have to get good movement speed and all the rest, is good in building up a floor of constraints. But then also there are different players. Like, for example, for me, around the time that I kill the pinnacle bosses of the couple of leagues that I'm engaging in a Path of Exile 2 bots, in a Path of Exile 2 patch, if I've completed the challenges and I've killed the Arbiter of Ash and I've killed the Arbiter of Divinity, and that's that, sometimes I'll roll a second character, but not really. And other people have other goals. So for example, other people really want to start a league starter, but so they can re-roll into a very specialized build with cast on dodge or cast on ailment or cast on crit, or they want to re-roll a gemling once they have the currency to get a very specialized gemling build going, and so forth. And so part of the argument about rarity that I hear from people treats the discussion as though it is good or even expected that everyone try to keep up with the sort of fubgun archetype, by which I mean a player who progresses very quickly, accumulates a huge amount of currency, and then gets very far ahead of the player base. But I'm not sure that I want the game to be designed around ensuring that the bulk of the player base views that as the goal. I'm certainly happy for people to play that way, but I also want the game to be designed around the idea of a new player being happy that they killed the Arbiter for the first time, or a player being very happy that they've focused on build progression for several leagues, but this league they want to learn how to craft caster gear, and so they do a bunch of breach, and then they start crafting and trading, and they enjoy a craft and trade league. Or someone else really just enjoys plain mapping on their warrior build and they just play their warrior build, or someone else, you know, views the campaign as a complete RPG game on its own and plays that and then logs out. And so if you look at this tool that exists in Item Rarity, and then you say, it doesn't let me keep up with Fubgun because I need, or players like Fubgun, that sort of archetype of player, and I want it to be the case that it's designed such that...
I am sorry that I interrupt you in the middle of your thing, but up until this point, you have been mirroring my opinion. I agree entirely with that. And that is a problem with Rarity, that Rarity fits into that archetype.
But I think that it's good that there are things that appeal to Fubgun that don't appeal to me.
But why does it have to be Rarity, though? Fubgun likes a lot of other shit, not necessarily Rarity. He likes blasting the maps, having using options.
Sure.
You don't need Rarity for that. He does it in PoE 1 without Rarity.
Sure. I also do it in PoE 2 without Rarity. It's not that hard to get a zoomy...
Exactly. I play without Rarity, and that is exactly why I hate it, because I know that I am handicapping myself by not using it. It is not necessary. I know that it is not necessary. But you know you are leaving money on the table by not using it. Because it is undoubtedly that it is, you get more money if you use it, basically.
So I suppose I have a question then of like...
By the way, I'm sorry that I interrupt you again, but I wanted to say that I am also like you in the goal-oriented thing, in that I also play the game like my goal is like clearing the Atlas, getting all my points, clearing the quests, killing the bosses, getting the challenges, and I beat the game. I am done. Like, I am not this type of player, like, I keep farming and farming and farming for what? I already won. You know?
Sure, but then there are players like, for example, I think of Dead Rabbit and Miso, like, and their hunt for voices, where, like, they enjoy the single farming of just, like, I'm just going to kill bosses until I get voices. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do Rite of the Nameless until my keyboard breaks, because I want voices on stream. It'll be fun. So my question, there's a chatter who's making a very good point in chat. Tinks feel good. It feels bad to know you could get more tinks by making your character weaker. I'm not sure that you are making, like, I think there's a point in PoE 2 and in nearly every ARPG where your character is so strong that additional strength doesn't matter. Right, like
it does. Though. I am making a saga right now where I am making a werewolf build for every single ascendancy in the game. I need my, trust me, I need my suffixes. I cannot put Rarity on my shit unless I go like I spend 5 mirrors in my fucking build in gear. I cannot do that. If I want to spend under 500 divines in my build or under a mirror, or something, I have to use all my affixes, right? Sure. I cannot sacrifice to put Rarity in my shit.
But okay, this is gonna, I won't quote a number of hours because otherwise I'll seem out of touch. Having my build this particular league, I got ridiculously lucky on a craft early in the league. I bought a cheap weapon crafting base and then I just won the craft. Okay, my build was worth 500 div on day 4 of the league. So like, even if you look at the typical length of a league being, say, 4 months, right? I know that I'm like, I have more free time and I'm a competitive speedrunner and all that. But even if you say that the average player would take 3 times as long as me, yes, there'll be inflationary effects on them and that matters. But like, what are they supposed to do for build progression after week 4 of the league when they can one-shot everything?
But that is more, wouldn't you say that that is more of a problem of that they can one-shot everything more than needing Rarity? Why not fix the problem instead of having a dog shit stat that is boring, that warps the meta game? Why not add content that is challenging so that you can keep progressing your character power-wise?
I think that the core systems design of Path of Exile 2... How do I say this? I think that... So, like, that's a good thought and it's a common thought. Like, we don't have real Ubers in Path of Exile 2, and I want them to be in the game, to be clear. And I think that it would, for example, for me, if there were true Ubers in Path of Exile 2, killing Uber Arbiter of Divinity would be sick, and I would love for that to be in the game. I still think it's the case that, okay, I can progress my character to the point where I kill Uber Arbiter of Divinity, who has 1.4 billion HP. When I go back to Juiced Expedition or 200% Delirium or, Abyssal Modifier stacking maps, etc., whatever your endgame Juicy Juice farm is, 4-tablet, city map, whatever, your Uber killing character with the way that PoE 2 is structured right now would be so much stronger than the content in those maps. And are you saying you're going to farm Uber Arbiter? Yes, that's one challenge to build toward, but if you give Uber Arbiter a drop that is desirable enough to be a motivation to farm, then people are going to complain that, well, I'm playing, I don't know, I'm playing Bone Cage Witch, and that's not as strong as Plant Lich, and that means that now I'm left out of the meta because that's not as strong as this other thing. And so then you'll just have the same argument again that people have about Rarity and about juiced maps, where people say Twister was really strong, Whirling Assert Martial Artist is really strong, and I feel pigeonholed into playing that meta. So Uber Arbiters existing as an isolated challenge is cool, but if you give them something that's desirable enough to be farmed, that players are going to want to farm it, and that chase drop for that ends up being, the equivalent of a 4-socket Voices, it's the uber valuable thing, then we're going to have the same argument all over again.
Okay. This will be, by the way, I am not trying to guilt trip you like you don't play PoE 1, but a lot of this would be answered if you played PoE 1. But,
no, I think that's a perfectly valid take.
And this is, and that is why one of my complaints is that a lot of these, they already know the answer because they already solved it in PoE 1. But let me explain. Your point is totally valid, and I agree. But they already know solutions for this. So one thing is that in PoE 1 it also happens that not all builds can kill the Ubers. It is right now happening to me in the current PoE 1 league that my build is not being able to kill Ubers. But that also creates a chase. Okay, now I have to gear way more my character to be able to kill Ubers, which by itself is something cool in terms of goal-orientedness. And not everybody, that is another thing. In PoE 1, not everybody expects to clear Ubers. That is one of the things GGG is trying to figure out to PoE 2. Mark said this in an interview, that he doesn't want people to feel like they have to kill Ubers. But trying to build your character up until that point, it is good. But another thing that you solve it is by having good balance, in the sense that, or a good enough balance in the sense that many builds are possible, are able to beat the Ubers. Also by not only having one Uber, but you have 5 Ubers, let's say. So your build might be dog shit at 3 of them, but it is good for the other 2 because of the type of damage or the type of mechanics or whatever. Also, by having, because you at the start of your argument, you also say once you beat the Uber boss, now all the game is dog shit because the other thing is also weak.
No, I didn't say dog shit, but your build would be more strong than the content. Yeah.
I know. I am sorry if it sounds like I am putting words in your mouth or I am trying to.
No. I'm just clarifying for the audience. I know that you and I are friends. I get it.
Okay. But I get it, right? You are meaning now your character is stronger and you are cheating in the game, basically. Nothing is a challenge. PoE 1 also has 2 types of content that scale a lot, that keep challenging your character almost infinitely. And one of them is actually my favorite league mechanic that I want to see in PoE 2, and it is called Delve. Delve is a mechanic where you are going into the ground, and it is levels of depth. And the further down you go, the stronger and stronger and stronger the monsters become. And there comes a point where you go so deep that a white monster is as powerful as an Uber boss. And they come at you, a bunch of them, right? So to be able to go deep in Delve, you need a character way stronger than an Uber killing character, right? And there is another thing that is called Baldos map. Baldos is the name of a character. that is also very hard to do, that you also need a character way stronger than the other thing. So what I am meaning is that as long as you have other challenges and very big scaling challenges, you can keep scaling power without needing to have this tertiary dog shit stat. Which, by the way, even by that argument, if we remove the power argument and you just say, I want a tier vector of scaling that is not offense or defense, okay, I can give you that. Why does that tier vector have to be rarity? Cannot be something cooler.
So I have a question. It'll give me a second to formulate. So suppose that there are two different types of players that exist. And for the sake of example, I will call them the Zoom player and the Bash player. So the Zoom player really enjoys full screen clear. They play skills like Whirling Assault, or they use tech like Herald of Ice chaining, or they Herald chaining in general.
I am so sorry that I interrupt you, but you just gave me an idea real quick. And hold that thought. You are going to continue. But I was going to say that and I forgot. That is another tier vector, by the way, of scaling. If you want to keep scaling your character, speed is another vector. And that is something that people do in PoE 1. Okay, I kill everything. Now I just want to kill it faster. Okay, continue.
And then there's another person who enjoys, they're a Jonathan Rogers visionary combat enjoyer. Okay. They enjoy the idea that like an individual rare monster, I want to read the modifiers. I want that to change how I play. I want things to be extraordinarily threatening. I want to dodge attacks. I love combo gameplay. I love dodging and then waiting for a punish window. Completely different types of players, right? Both of them valid to enjoy the game how they want, by zooming or by bashing. Both players, I've been both of those players at different points, right? There are times where I enjoy really methodical, skill-based, reaction-based combat, and there are other times where I want to zoom and blast, and I'm happy that ARPGs are a genre where I can get both of those things sometimes in the same game. My question is like, okay, so Delve exists for like the Bash player, and fast density mapping with mechanics like Abyss and Breach exists for the zooming player, and you can modify and hybridize these ideas. So if you're saying like, okay, you reach an endpoint where you can comfortably do T15, T16 maps, right? And one player could scale by killing more monsters more quickly. So they could scale by killing monster density, by moving more quickly, by increasing their attack speed or AoE, or by plugging in more spirit to get access to cast on crit or whatever. And the other avenue for scaling is more of that vanilla style combo based combat, but with more rarity and sparser stuff like the monster effectiveness instead of pack size scaling. I see rarity as another option in that, where you want the combat to stay the same, but you want the same rewards that someone would get if they were scaling up to super juicy, scary expedition. And you want the same rewards that you would get if someone were scaling up to the most meta cast on dodge spark build, zoom, 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 go, go, go. And the rarity player prefers the vanilla style of stuff, but instead of using their affixes to build up to the insane required single target damage and survivability of the Bash player, or the insane attack speed, AoE, and movement speed of the Zoom player, they say, I enjoy this middle ground of combat, but I want rewards that go up with what people get from 200% delirium juiced expedition, and I also want rewards that go up with, like I've been watching King Kongor all week, and he has like a multi-projectile cast on dodge spark build that can clear a whole map in 30 seconds. What exists for the player in the middle, and rarity is one of those scaling vectors.
King Kongor is awesome, by the way. I like him a lot.
Yeah, and his build is sick, by the way. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen Kongor's thing, pull up any VOD, click on him doing any map, the build looks sick.
Okay, but
you see what I mean, right? Like there's a spectrum there. And
Mark has also talked about this, by the way. But I will tell you two things for this. One, in this case, I agree with you. That is cool. Okay, I don't want the speed. I want the more like the the warrior souls-like combat with the rare where I am dodging and I am hitting. Okay, that is cool. I like that. The thing is that in both cases, and this is the problem with Rarity, the uber speed guy will also be using Rarity and getting more rewards. That is the reality of the game, that both players are going to be using Rarity.
So then that's a problem with balance and not a problem with rarity.
Exactly. Then why you don't need Rarity? Balance the game. And that is my second point. If you balance the effectiveness thing, like if, and this was what I understood when Mark talked before this Atlas came out, when we were in the old Atlas and Siggy asking about how the new Atlas was going to be, he talked about how they were going to put more effectiveness into the Atlas and separate it from pack size. In practice, it has not been that way. People are stacking both effectiveness and pack size. What I originally thought was going to happen is that you were going to be forced into choosing, or you want effectiveness or you want pack size, right? So in that case, you could tune the drops of the monsters in terms that more effectiveness gives you more drops and more pack size, you have more chances of getting shed. So in the math behind it, probabilistically, the drops balance out. Again, you don't need Rarity for that.
Sure, but what I'm saying is, like, you can imagine a player who gets the T15s and, you know, progresses through one or two of the league mechanics. They go and clear out the Abyss area. They go and clear out the Breach area. They do some Breach Hives, whatever. And then they go, I like this. And they look at, you know, Giga Blaster Jazzarus doing 200% City Delirium, and they go, that looks scary. I don't want to do that. They look at, you know, super high skill player, professional player, Jazzarus _, and they don't want to do that. And then they look at some super zoomy player, and they don't want to do that either. What should exist for that player to scale to keep up with the people who are scaling pack size and effectiveness?
At that point, if you don't like doing effectiveness and you don't like doing pack size, you don't like Path of Exile. The only other thing that could be there was possibly bossing or something like that.
No, rarity exists. You can have the exact same combat experience you're having right now, but with more drops, without modifying the combat in the direction of pack size or effectiveness with rarity.
But at some point, you have to introduce difficulty into the game to get drops, right? Are you going to give people drops by not increasing the difficulty of the game?
No, but the difficulty of the game for them, instead of in being the difficulty of clearing large packs or clearing super effective monsters, is in trying to force all of their affixes to fit into fewer slots so they can get gold rings and gold amulet and everything else.
That is why I said it in the other, in the previous question, is that by Rarity existing, it doesn't only target this player. All the other players are also going to use it, and this fucks this player even more.
Sure. So then my thought then is like, okay, what we want then is for the tablet system to not allow people to pursue both density and effectiveness, because we want there to be more diversity in the style of combat that people can pursue, and that's a balance problem.
Both people will pursue Rarity. So that is my point. That let's say that you want to do pack size, but Rarity exists, you are going to do pack size and you are going to have Rarity. Or you are going to go effectiveness and you are going to have Rarity. Because
I think
wouldn't
for
you
example,
get more drops?
So I think, for example, if you wanted to pursue effectiveness and we invent some penalty. So for example, suppose all super effective maps have a scaling debuff to player resistances. And that means that every single player who wants to play super effective maps needs not just 75% res, but they need 115% res, because 200% effectiveness maps have a 40% resistance penalty. And therefore that player needs to invest a ton in resistances and defenses, and therefore they don't have the opportunity to get rarity and that, because they can't reach the overcapped res and the effectiveness at the same time. That's a balance problem.
Okay, I can see that. I would be fine with that. But at that point, if I was a developer, I would be saying, why the fuck am I putting all this extra work into this if I could just or delete Rarity or make it not apply to currency and the problem is solved?
But that's like asking, why do we have 60 maps in the Atlas instead of 20? They could do so much less work and we could have 20 maps instead of 60.
not but in having more maps, it actually provides an actual functional cool thing for the gameplay. But Rarity, I am arguing that it doesn't provide shit. In fact, it detracts from the experience.
No, but that's my point, right? Like, if you talk about the difference between the pack size player and the effectiveness player, that also provides something for the player to do, to make a choice between super effective low density combat and super dense low effective combat, right?
But you are
so like the whole thing is that we want more diversity of playstyles available to the player.
You are arguing for people to play in the end game, in the late end game, with the same type of, I don't want to say gameplay, but with the same type of combat of the campaign, or where they just got into maps, and the game is made in a way that you are supposed to get that the combat gets harder and harder. The game is made that things are going to scale up.
Sure.
So you want to make Rarity the thing that is going to fix this. Let's say that you want to fix it. That I don't think GGG wants to do that. But let's say that you want to do it. Why does it have to be with Rarity? I am sure they can come up with something else.
Because within the history of ARPGs, stats like Rarity and Magic Find are an avenue for the player to progress their character without modifying the combat. Like, you're saying the game is made in such a way that you are forced to scale up the combat, and I don't think that that's true. Like, again, if you look at Diablo 1, if you look at Diablo 2, in the history of the genre, the endgame was just killing the same Bale over and over again. It didn't get more difficult. The concept that you need to juice was an addition to the base format, and a beautiful addition, by the way. It is the main thing that makes PoE 1 the greatest ARPG of all time, and the reason that PoE 1 has been so influential that people modify Diablo 2 to make Project Diablo 2, which is more like PoE 1 than base Diablo 2 is.
Yeah.
And that's great, but saying that you want to take away the opportunity for the repetitive pull the lever player who wants the same boss farming rotation over and over again, who wants the same map farming rotation over and over again, which is the historical core of the genre, I think that you're reducing the diversity of playstyles available to the player. And we certainly have a balance problem where the pack size player also wants effectiveness and the effectiveness player also wants pack size, and both of them also want rarity. And these things could be more distinct, so that way you don't feel the opportunity cost of not going for the one that you don't want to play. But I don't think that we should remove this from the game simply because right now there's a situation of fear of missing out, when we could just recenter on the fact that this is a balance and gameplay style diversity problem.
I will agree with that, and I will just circle back to what I mentioned earlier, and why it is acceptable in Diablo 2 and why it is acceptable in PoE 1. Because it doesn't affect currency. And you want a third way of scaling your character that is non-combat related. Again, not my personal preference, but I understand that you are saying, okay, there are players that like it, and it is cool that this exists. Don't take it away from them. Okay, make it not apply to currency, because the problem is that when it becomes, I'm going to say pseudo-mandatory, because it is not 100% mandatory. You can play without it and be successful, but it is pseudo-mandatory because the best builds in the game do this. You are hampering, like harming your potential gains by not using it. You know you are losing currency by not using it, so it is a disadvantage not using it. So that is my problem. My problem is the perception that is mandatory. Just make it non-mandatory, and one easy way would be not apply to currency.
So I've never played a true rarity bot, but going on the numbers that I've seen from other people, before the changes to Alpha's Howl and Gravebinds, I think are the name of the gloves, before the changes to the two of those, it was the case that rarity bots and culling bots in Path of Exile 2 could get up to 600% rarity. Why don't you get up to 600% rarity if you're telling me that maximizing rarity is, mandatory? You feel that it's so mandatory.
I hate rarity. I do what I preach. I run zero rarity in my build. I play like if it didn't exist. But I know what I am doing. I am losing money.
Sure, but like the general player doesn't get up to 600% rarity, and the general player also doesn't feel an obligation to get to 600% rarity.
Because in the case of the rarity bot, they are full going in rarity. They are not a combat oriented build. They are playing with another player that is actually doing the damage. So the normal player wants to play their character. So what they do is they go for a powerful build like Twisters, for example, and they just put 150% rarity in their character, and that is more than enough. Because on top of that, rarity has diminishing returns. So you don't need 600%. These are real money traders, motherfuckers, that are using
sure.
the last drop of shit they can get. But for the normal player, it is not relevant.
Sure. So I guess my question is like, so there is a point where even the most conventional single player person who is a hyper optimized blaster, again, that sort of like Fub Gun archetype, that Dead Rabbit archetype of someone who gets really, really up there in character optimization and is really looking to farm incredible amounts of currency and have incredibly min-maxed gear with mirror tier everything. Why doesn't that player get 600% rarity? And the answer is like, because their player power goes down and their diminishing returns on the stat. So then why is your solution deleting rarity instead of saying like, okay, we already see diminishing returns around 100 to 150% is what the YouTubers tell us when they do their testing. So then what if we just increased everyone's base rarity to be higher so that rarity started out as a diminishing return stat?
Okay, I'd be good with that, because that addresses my problem. My problem is that I have to have rarity. I don't want to have rarity. If you can solve that, I don't have a problem with rarity existing. The problem is that you have to have it.
But Jazzarus, are you having fun in Path of Exile too?
I am. A lot. Best game ever. I love
it. And you just said that you don't play rarity. So then why do you have to have it if you're already having fun and you already don't have rarity?
Because this is me, brother. We are talking about me. I always like off meta stuff. I am not forced into the FOMO dog shit. And I know, but I know that I am earning less than I could. Majority of players don't think that way. Majority of players, on top of that, this also affects your play time in the game. So let's say you have 4 hours a week to play the game. So you can say to this player, okay, in these 4 hours that you are going to play, you could have rarity and earn 200 divines, or you can not have rarity and earn 100 divines in those 4 hours that you have to play the game a week. What are they going to do? Brother, they are going to earn the 200 divines because they don't have the time to have the disadvantage on top of that, right?
So the
majority of players are going to feel the FOMO of, dude, what am I doing? I could just be getting rarity and earning more money. Why am I wasting my time not having rarity?
Okay, so like Jazzarus, you're extremely good at video games, right? You're like the best video game player in the world. And the general player base is complaining that a boss that you find an appropriate amount of challenge for you, God Gamer Jazzarus, is too difficult, right? And they go, I can't kill Uber Mephisto Lila Maven Arbiter of Exile Kurgle, whoever, okay? And they go, please, Grinding Gear Blizzard 11th Hour Games Moon Studio, please nerf this. I can't keep up with incredible players like Jazzarus. And you ask the players who are bad, who are not as good as Jazzarus, what they want, and they go, I want to be as good as Jazzarus. And then the solution of the studio should be to like nerf that instead of saying get good. Like, what?
No, you are jumping the shark entirely, because now you are talking about power oriented stuff. Rarity. I
admit that like let me put it this way. If you put me in a room with Dead Rabbit, right? Dead Rabbit and I are boys, okay? We spent 11 hours playing Counter-Strike and getting drunk 2 days ago. Nice, okay, it was phenomenal. Dude, it was sick. If you ask Dead Rabbit if he can keep up with me in the campaign, he'll say no. If you ask me if I know how to get rich like Dead Rabbit in the endgame, the answer is no, right? But I don't sit here and go, well, I hope that you bring down rarity and I hope that you make the crafting system easier so that way I can get as rich as Rabbit.
That is not what I am asking for.
Because like it's an aspirational system. You like, yeah, you have to learn to master this thing, and if you have less time, you have less time.
In my scenario, that would still be happening. Removing rarity doesn't remove that from the game. In fact, I would argue that it improves that.
But your argument is that you feel that it's mandatory because you can't keep up with blasters who are getting 600 div while you're getting 100 div, right? So like, actually,
I don't necessarily look at it that way because I don't play like that.
I want to put up my toxic hat for a second.
Yes.
I want to put on my toxic hat for a second.
You can go as toxic as you want.
My favorite thing about sports tournaments of any kind, you have, the World Cup, and Italy doesn't make it to the World Cup, or you have, the American college football playoff recently went from having 2 teams to 4 teams, and then 4 teams to 12 teams, and now we're going to move from 12 to 16. Here's my favorite thing about sports tournaments is if you are the 5th best team in the world and only 4 teams make it to the playoffs, you can sit there and you can cope as long as you want. And that's great, because then you can go to the sports bar and you can be like, listen, we were undefeated. We should have been in the playoff. The committee is biased. This is stupid. And then you have the entertainment of being a sports fan who's arguing, right? But here's my thing. If they delete rarity from the game, and then you're still getting 100 div an hour, and Dead Rabbit is still getting 600 div an hour, you don't have the ability to cope anymore. You should think of this problem of rarity as hoping that GGG never changes about it, so that way you have something to complain about. And the entertainment of having the argument with me, you call your buddy on stream, I crack open a beer, you crack open a beer, we argue. I hope the problem is never solved, so that way you and I can keep being friends who argue with each other. You don't want it solved. You just want something to complain about because you're bad at the game and you want to blame it on rarity. You want to blame your low currency drop rate on rarity instead of blaming it on the efficiency of your gameplay and on the quality of your build.
I will always complain about something, by the way, for sure. Always I will find something to complain about because it is fun. And I do love having these conversations. I do think that in debates when we disagree, we find cool stuff that people are not thinking about, because by trying to outsmart the other guy, you figure out the stuff and you figure out the stuff, and then we come out with cool stuff. But again, I agree completely with you, dude. You are compound, like you are reinforcing my argument. I am right now again playing PoE 1, and where people don't focus as much on having rarity. And yes, Fogon still blasts way harder than me, and here's way more currency than me. And I am fine with that. I don't have to cope, or I don't have to say, oh, it is because of this, because of that. He's a better player. He blasts harder. He gets a lot of currency. Let's fucking go. I love it. The problem is the other way around. I don't have to think that it is because of rarity. Fuck rarity. And since you talk about sports and you are talking about the meritocracy of having the 5 best teams or 4 best teams. For example, I don't know if you like baseball, but some years ago, there was a big controversy because the Houston Astros were doing like stealing signs from the other team or whatever the fuck. There was this thing that they were doing where they were knowing what pitch the pitcher was going to throw, and if it was certain type of pitch, they will hit a can really, really loud, and that way the batter will know if it was that pitch. It will be absolute dog shit. In this case, hitting the can is rarity. It is dog shit losing to a motherfucker because he's hitting the can, and I refuse to stoop so low as to hit the fucking can. I don't want to do it, and I know that I am losing because that analogy is failing.
No, you're saying like that would be if we were having an argument about whether or not RMT should be allowed. That's the cheating. Rarity isn't cheating. It's just a part of the game that you don't like. You're saying like, I know that I could hit more home runs if I put pine tar on my gloves, and I know that pine tar is legal, and I know that everyone's been using it for 100 years in the sport, and I know that if you have a bat that's allowed and you have a drop 8 bat and you do all this and that, then you could do this and that, and it could hit more home runs. But I don't like washing my hands. I don't want pine tar on my hands. It's allowed. It's in the game.
I agree with this argument. Yes, it is something like that. Yes, it is something like that. But in the case of Path of Exile, it completely constrains the whole fucking way of playing the game. Very different to how it happens in baseball.
Yeah, but are you upset that baseball players wear gloves?
Difference between something legal and something not allowed. I do agree.
The other thing that I want to say, just on this topic of like a lot of people who play both PoE 1 and 2 wish that, one game were more like the other. People wish that, I wish that the animations and environmental art from PoE 2 were in PoE 1. And I wish that a lot of the systems design from PoE 1 was in PoE 2. These sorts of things come up a lot, right? This week I've been playing a game called Ori, which is made by Moon Studios, the people who make No Rest for the Wicked. It's a platforming game. And I really hate the boss fights in that game so much. I just think the combat is just dog shit. It's terrible. I don't like it. And so I literally Googled like Ori no boss fights mod, because it's a single player game. So I can mod the boss fights out of it if I want to. That's my thought. And it turns out that I'm playing the sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And it turns out that in the first game, Ori and the Blind Forest, there are no boss fights. So I just chose the wrong game. And you know what my response to that was? It was to uninstall Ori and the Will of the Wisps and go and play the one that didn't have boss fights. I didn't have a podcast about how they should make Ori and the Will of the Wisps not have boss fights. I tried to find a solution on my own. I couldn't. I realized that it wasn't the game for me, and I went and played the one that's for me.
So what are you trying to say? That I should uninstall Path of Exile 2 and play PoE 1?
Mm-hmm.
That is what you are suggesting. I like PoE 2 more. Why do we need to have a dog shit stat if we can fix it?
Because I like it. And I don't come over here and go like, well, we should screw up what Jazzarus likes in order to have it be better for Crimson.
Hey, Big J, listen to me. We have Crimson over here. He loves Rarity. Do nothing about it, dude.
Dude, leave Rarity. I like it.
It sucks, man. It sucks. Like, also, let's get a little bit silly in here. But I play games because it is a little bit silly. It is a fantasy. When you are in your starting screen and you are going to create a character and you see, okay, I can be a druid, I can be a warrior, I can be a monk. You are thinking, oh boy, I cannot wait to build this character and I am going to be the best magic finder in all of the land. I am going to be the best Rarity boy because this is so cool. Nah, that is dog shit, pussy shit.
No. Listen, when I play Baldur's Gate 3, I could build a wizard who has super high intelligence and spell save DC and do a ton of damage. I could build a fighter who has super high strength and uses Tavern Brawler to do an enormous amount of throwing damage. I can also build a rogue who has incredibly high stealth and sleight of hand, and I can pickpocket everybody. I can also build a bard who has incredibly high charisma and talks my way out of conflict. Yes, I absolutely sometimes think when I download a game for the first time that I really want to be a loot goblin and not someone who punches people in the face.
You can be, and this is the cool thing, and that is the problem with Rarity. You can be a loot goblin without needing Rarity. That is what FOMO is in PoE 1, by the way. The whole drama in PoE 1, this league was about loot, by the way, by wanting to be a loot goblin without Rarity.
So, my question is like, I often like seeing the game break at the edges in ARPGs. So, like, I'll give you two examples. One is Rarity, one is not. Do you know what King Kongor has been doing on stream this week?
I have not.
Okay. What he's been doing is he was like, I wonder if the Atlas is actually infinite. And so he looked up the size of file that's used to produce Atlas maps, like the overworld Atlas art. And he was like, oh, it only has a maximum file size of 65,535 maps across. I wonder if I can go out in a straight line using the Grand Project over and over again and just do that until the Atlas crashes. Like, what happens when I reach the end of the quote-unquote infinite Atlas? And believe me, he's like, every time he tries to load his Atlas now that he's like out thousands and thousands and thousands of maps in a straight line, it's getting weird, man. He loads the atlas and it'll show him the wrong biome and then flicker back and forth. There are texture bugs. The maps like move around all jittery.
He's doing a great service to the community by doing that. Just like when you were doing the thresholds for the ability.
And so the thing for me then is like, I also enjoy
the experience. When you told me that you were testing the experience.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a ton of work. But one of the other things that was really interesting to me for old ARPGs is that you can get rarity so high that it creates fused items. Do you know about this? This isn't a thing in Path of Exile 2. This is just a fun history lesson. It used to be the case that if you got rarity so high, it would force every item that dropped to be unique. But in Path of Exile 2, for example, there are some item bases that don't have a unique version yet, right? Like the Bombard crossbow doesn't have a unique. And so if you had high enough rarity, it would try to generate a Bombard crossbow and then fail. And so it would take the unique stats from one item and like try to force them onto the wrong base. And this would create really bizarre stuff. So when I think of like the beginning of Abyssal League, I was watching a lot of streams where Glitched and Guy That Dies and Viking and Ruse Cruise, that group of people, Paycheck, they were all playing together and they were on like a crazy high rarity 6-man stack. And they were getting so many divines that it would sometimes drop them in stacks because it would fail to generate. Their rarity was so high that like they would try to roll a currency. It would roll above a divine. There's nothing above a divine. And so it would just drop them 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 at a time. And that wasn't intended, but I found it super interesting. And so for me, I really enjoy a lot of the like fiddly game systems about things. And for me, like min-maxing against as many different systems as exist and considering the optimal place in all of the trade-off curves is what I enjoy about the game and about character design. And so the idea that you would like take away chaos res, or the idea that you would take away bleeding, or the idea that you would take away, like actually they did take away bleeding because now in 0.5 when the player is bleeding and they move, they don't take aggravated bleeding damage. It's just a constant amount. So like I think that rarity is good because it enables a play style, like a content engagement style that is different from juicing by changing map size, by changing pack size or changing effectiveness, and instead forces the player to focus on gear, where they try and get gear affixes in order to create that, the same way that the effectiveness player or the pack size player is looking for tablets. And I like that. I like that the player can choose to look for gear instead of tablets. And I also like that it's yet one more thing for me to think about, because the whole game is an artificial exercise in min-maxing. And I want more things to min-max. I don't want the game to get simpler.
Okay, I agree with you, and I will circle back to a lot of the things that I have been saying. You can still get stuff to break the game and to build and to do that is not rarity. It doesn't have to be rarity. It can be something else. And again, but when you have something like rarity, it becomes universally good to the point that instead of creating variety, you are diminishing variety because you have to fit it. It also creates a metagame warp when your build has to be able to include rarity to be a good build, because both the pack size, the effectiveness, the slow, the fast, all the farming methods all benefit from rarity. When you get to that point, then we have a problem, right? I am not against you having different ways of playing the game. I am not against you trying to scale a tier vector. I am not against you trying to break the game in different ways. I am against the answer to all of that being fucking rarity.
Sure, but like, couldn't we have the same argument about effectiveness?
No, because effectiveness is not in your gear, it's in the monster.
Well, your tablet stack is part of your build. Right? Like,
not
that's
necessarily.
Like,
I am fine if you leave rarity in the tablets, by the way. I am fine with that. I don't care.
But okay, so then why is rarity on tablets okay and rarity on gear not okay?
Because I want my modifiers in my gear to be for me, for my character.
So like if we had like a Diablo 2 style charm system, or even if we like our gold charms, okay? Actually, that's a good question.
Gold charms for me are like in the middle ground. I don't mind them, but I would prefer if they weren't there. But I don't mind them because there is opportunity cost in there. Okay, let it be.
Is there anything that would diminish your player power? Like, for example, movement speed could be considered player power, right? Because it allows you to get around faster. But like, is there any stat that you can imagine that diminishes your player power but gives you some upside that you would be okay with?
Yes, we have it in the game already, like radius.
Sure. So then, like, why aren't you mad about light radius being in the game?
Because it is not mandatory.
So the answer is like light radius is bad and rarity is good, and therefore I need to get rarity because it's good. But light radius is bad, and therefore I don't need it, and therefore it's fine.
Yes, that is exactly it.
I get, you know, it's an honest answer. I don't.
That is exactly it.
Never want. No one ever accuse Jazzarus of being dishonest about what he likes in the video game. He's a very honest man.
That is
so,
exactly
like,
it.
If it turned out to be the case that like light radius in PoE 2 did give some ridiculous advantage, which by the way I think it does in some cases if you stack enough of it, like, would that be problematic?
I would probably, like, if it gets to the point that it is too unbalanced, I would complain like, hey, balance this, right? But I don't think I would be ever be as mad as with Rarity because it wouldn't, unless it provides an amount of power so big that it warps the builds to the point that you get more currency because of speed or power or something like that. I wouldn't be as mad because it doesn't affect the economy as directly as Rarity does, and you wouldn't feel as much of it by not. I think Rarity is a big offender also because like Radius has kind of a gameplay component where you are looking further into the map, but Rarity does nothing. It is just the monster drops more shit.
If there were a stat on items that said like, I'm trying to think of an example of a non-combat stat. Like it really is for you, just it's a non-combat stat. And you'd be okay with it being on tablets.
It is compounding between different things. It is a non-combat stat that at the same time is very good, so you need it. It takes away power. It contrives your build by having to put it in there. It affects the economy. So even when you are not using it, you are not only handicapping yourself, but the other players that are using it are impacting the economy, and that also affects you. So it is a big motherfucker.
You know, I think you've won me over to this. We can get rid of it on gear and we can have it on tablets. I think I would be okay with that.
There you fucking go! Yes!
I think I would be okay with that.
We have it in the tablets, in the Waystone, in the Atlas skill tree. You can have it.
Because
like, if you want that content, vector of scaling,
because you're right, there is no other form of content customization other than Waystones and tablets. There's no form of content customization that exists on your gear.
But it doesn't have to be there because that is what tablets and Waystones are for, and the gear is for the gear, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's the only stat that's like, it feels like you took a, I mean, I still want it to stay the way that it is, but I would be okay with it changing to just being on Waystones.
Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go.
And, like if that was a patch note, I wouldn't be mad.
If it stays on gear, but it becomes non-mandatory. I am also okay with that. As you said earlier, what if it only affects a transmute to augments or augments to exile or something like that? Let's fucking go. I am fine with that. Who cares? So we both are finding a common ground with each other.
What if, this is really dumb, what if PoE 2, I know that this is a word for a different thing in PoE 1. I'm just going to use this word. What if PoE 2 had a trinket system where you could like take a tablet and put it in a slot on your character, and that tablet was like always active on every map?
I don't think that is stupid at all. In fact, I think that is a good idea. And that could
So that way,
satisfy
like, you
a
can
lot
still...
of the things that you have discussed. And I'm
Yeah, so
fine
that
with
way,
that
like,
because you wouldn't put combat stuff in there. It is just map-oriented stuff in there.
yeah, you'd say like, oh, well, this tablet increases magic pack size by 40%, and like really valuable tablets would go in your trinket slot.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is an awesome idea, in fact.
Because then I would still get to have the like craft and trade and try and min-max how good my quote-unquote trinket is.
Yes. And I wouldn't be mad because I have to put rarity in my rings.
Yeah, because then you'd be able to go like, I really want super juiced effectiveness, whatever the fuck. And I always want to run into super effective rare monster stacking abyss maps. So I'm going to take the absolute god tier abyss tablet and all the, you know, the 5 mod multiplied delirium, whatever the fuck tablet crafting nonsense people do. And it all goes there. And then that way, because there are tablets right now that are worth 10 div or 20 div.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to see how expensive good tablets would get if it never got consumed and you could convert it into like a thing that went on your belt.
I don't think they would completely get rid of the consumable, but like as an additional system, I think it's cool.
Well, I'm just imagining, like, for me as someone who really enjoys the campaign, right now, rarity, like I said, in the upper echelons of campaign player skill, Angormus and I will talk about, oh, this run I'm getting a ton of regals, and it's because I have 23% rarity in Act 2, but I can't get any transmutes, so I actually need to take off my rarity gear to get transmutes to craft my Act 3 weapon upgrade. And so now I'm imagining, like, I still want some of that, because, like, I'm very selfishly... I want the campaign to have that system, but a trinket slot that allowed me to like put a tablet in my belt to allow me to modify my campaign currency drops and chances for uniques and stuff outside of the Atlas mapping system would be interesting.
I do see how in your context specifically it is kind of cool to juggle around this, but again, and you said it well, selfishly for you, but like,
yeah, of course,
the vast majority of players are not worrying about that. But I do think that the idea of the trinket is actually a good idea. The trinket exists in PoE 1, by the way, but it is not like that. It is just for a particular mechanic called heist, where the trinket has bonuses that only applies to that mechanic, and it uses that mechanic, and it has 0 combat yet. It is just making more stuff drop in that mechanic. So there is precedent for this even.
We should create a currency called a Jazz Orb, which turns a tablet into a trinket.
Let's fucking go!
And it would be a really cool, because then you'd like, because you need some way to turn a 10-use tablet into like this infinite thing that I'm saying. So it has to be like a rare drop from the Jazzarus League, where we get Jazz Orbs that convert them, that allow us to carve tablets into trinkets.
That would be awesome. I am fine with that.
I've argued before that GGG should put Crimson Orbs in the game. Do you know what I want a Crimson Orb to do?
Okay, what does a Crimson Orb do?
I want Crimson Orbs to be a reward for participating in the races. You don't need to win. You don't even need to do well. You just participate. And then you get 1 Crimson Orb, which converts any non-holofoil unique into a red holofoil unique.
Ooh, that is beautiful. I like that.
So it doesn't change player power in any way. It's a tradable crafting currency. They already have the code for holofoil uniques of different colors, and we just make this one red, and it's the Crimson holofoil unique orb.
Beautiful. I love it. I like it. Let's put that shit into the game.